Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into, well, a real puzzle. The final months and the very sudden death of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. It happened in Vienna back in the winter of 1791.
It's a story that still fascinates, and for this, we've gathered quite a range of sources, haven't we?
We have everything from historical accounts written back then, medical notes or what passed for them, plus all the rumors that started swirling.
And of course, the way artists and writers have interpreted it all since.
Exactly. So our mission really is to try and follow the clues, sift through that gossip, separate fact from legend as best we can.
And maybe understand why this mystery just sticks around.
Let's try and picture it. Vienna, November 20th, 1791. Maybe some snow starting to fall. Horse-drawn sledges on the cobblestones.
And inside a cramped apartment on Rauhensteingasse, number 8, Mozart is seriously ill, feverish.
And he's only 35.
Yeah.
Shocking, really. Especially because he just had a pretty triumphant year, right? Premieres, performances.
Oh, absolutely. The Magic Flute had just opened to great acclaim. There was a Masonic banquet celebrating it. But underneath that success, well, there were debts, unfinished work, and this sudden severe illness.
And then his wife, Constance, comes back. She'd been away at a spa in Baden.
Yes, for her own health. And she returns to find him drastically changed. She talked about his sunken eyes, his skin looking mottled, and his hands were restless, almost like he was composing in the air.
Wow. And it's around this time he gets obsessed with the Requiem, isn't it? Saying he was writing it for himself.
Exactly. And then comes the story of the Gray Messenger, this mysterious figure arriving with an anonymous commission for the Requiem. Very dramatic.
But the reality behind this messenger was a bit more mundane.
Quite a bit, yes. It wasn't some supernatural harbinger. It was simply an emissary sent by Count Franz von Walsegg.
Ah, the Count.
Yes, an amateur musician. He had this rather peculiar habit of commissioning works from famous composers and then, well, passing them off as his own compositions.
So Mozart, maybe feeling his own mortality, sees this cloaked figure.
And perhaps reads more into it than there was. The reality was just, a business transaction, albeit a secretive one.
Okay, let's shift to the medical side. Back in 1791, what did doctors actually think was wrong with him?
Well, his main physician, Dr. Closet, diagnosed it as Hitzige's free cell fiber.
Which means?
Basically, a hot miliary fever. Think high fever, probably a rash, delirium. The general idea was it was some kind of infection sweeping through him.
Right. But looking back now with modern medicine, what do scholars suspect?
It's interesting how the theories have evolved. Rheumatic fever is a strong possibility. That often follows a streptococcal infection.
Okay.
Another theory is trichinosis. You get that from undercooked pork, and pork was definitely a staple in Vienna.
Plausible.
And then there's kidney failure. Chronic kidney problems, maybe worsened by treatments common at the time, like mercury.
Mercury, they use that as medicine.
Oh, yes, for all sorts of things. It was a common, if dangerous, treatment. So, ironically, the attempts to cure him might have actually aggravated his condition. It makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does. And the symptoms themselves sound horrific. This intense thirst, vomiting, the swelling.
Yeah, the edema. Apparently it got so bad they had to prop his arms up on pillows so he could breathe properly. Just awful.
Truly agonizing. But alongside these medical theories, we have the big one. The Salieri poisoning rumor. Where did that even start?
That seems to have really brewed in Vienna's coffee houses, the social hubs of the city. It fed on this idea of a rivalry.
Between Mozart and Antonio Salieri.
Exactly. Salieri was the imperial Kapellmeister, a big name in Italian opera circles. So the narrative of professional jealousy boiling over into murder, well, it was juicy. People love a good story.
But is there any actual evidence for it? Because from what I understand, the facts suggest something different.
You're right. The evidence against it is actually pretty strong. If you look at their letters, there seems to have been, professional respect, maybe some competition, sure, but not murderous hatred.
And Salieri was busy during Mozart's illness.
Very busy. He had his own premieres, court duties. The timeline just doesn't fit with him secretly plotting Mozart's demise.
So when did the rumor really gain steam? Was it later?
Much later, yes. Decades after Mozart's death, when Salieri was old and suffering from dementia, there are reports he made confusing remarks, maybe something about poisoned chocolate.
Ah, and people jumped on that.
They did. Those who already suspected foul play dismissed the fact he likely wasn't lucid. They saw it as a deathbed confession.
And then art took over.
Absolutely. Pushkin wrote a play, Mozart and Salieri. Then Rimsky-Korsakov turned that into an opera. and of course Peter Schaffer's play and the movie Amadeus.
Which was huge.
Immensely successful. And those works, while brilliant drama, really cemented this poisoning myth in the popular imagination, unfortunately overshadowing the historical reality.
It shows the power of a good narrative. Okay, what about the other main theory, the Masonic one?
Ah, yes. The Freemasons. Mozart was a member, quite famously.
And the magic flute is full of Masonic symbolism.
Exactly. So the theory goes that the opera revealed too many secrets of the lodge, that Mozart betrayed their trust and perhaps angered powerful conservatives, maybe even figures linked to the supposed Illuminati.
So, Masonic revenge.
That's the idea. Retribution from his Masonic brothers or related groups for exposing their rituals and Enlightenment ideals.
But again, what does the evidence say? Does this theory hold water?
Not really. The historical records actually show his fellow Masons being quite supportive. They expressed condolences, even helped Constance financially after his death.
Doesn't sound much like revenge.
Not at all. But, secret societies, hidden messages in art. It has a certain allure. It makes for another compelling story, even if the facts don't quite line up.
So amidst all these swirling theories, let's get back to Mozart's actual final days. December 4th, the day before he died, there was a brief moment of hope.
Yes, a sort of rally. His pupil, Franz Xaver Süssmayr, visited. They apparently looked over the score of the Requiem, the Lacrimosa part.
The part Süssmayr would later finish.
That's the one. And Mozart, despite being incredibly weak, supposedly hummed the alto line, maybe dictated a few more notes. It's a poignant image, isn't it? His musical mind working right until the end.
But it didn't last.
No. He became exhausted again, slipped into unconsciousness around midnight, and then at about 1 a.m, December 5th, 1791, he died.
And the official record just says severe miliary fever. Very nonspecific.
Extremely. And as we mentioned, no autopsy.
Why was that again? Just not common practice.
Not common, especially with fears of contagion. Plus, there was a general reluctance towards, cutting open bodies. It just wasn't routinely done. So we're left without the definitive medical insight.
And the funeral itself. Surprisingly basic for such a famous composer.
It really was. Emperor Joseph II had brought in these regulations to standardize funerals, make them simpler and cheaper for everyone, regardless of status. So Mozart got the common citizen treatment.
Which meant?
A very simple blessing, probably in a side chapel at St. Stephen's Cathedral, closed casket. Then a hearse took the body out to the St. Mark's Cemetery.
And the story goes that the few mourners were driven away by bad weather.
That's the account, yes. A storm blew in. Constanze wasn't there. She was apparently overcome with grief, and the financial strain was immense.
So he ends up in a common grave.
Yes, a communal grave, likely with quicklime added, which was standard practice, marked only by a simple wooden stake, like countless others. The exact spot was lost very quickly.
It's such a stark, almost brutal end, and Constance is left in a terrible position.
Absolutely dreadful. A widow, 2 young boys, and significant debts. Her main asset really was Mozart's music, especially the unfinished pieces.
Which brings it back to the Requiem and Süssmayr.
Right. Süssmayr became key. He was Mozart's student. He was there near the end. Constance needed the Requiem completed so it could be delivered to Count Walsegg and, perhaps more importantly, published and performed to generate income.
How much did Mozart actually leave behind for Süssmayr to work with?
It varied. Some parts, like the Introit and Kyrie, were pretty much fully orchestrated by Mozart. Others were in what's called short score, basically the voice parts and the bass line, maybe hints of instrumentation.
And some parts Süssmayr had to compose himself.
Yes, the Sanctus, Benedictus, and Agnus Dei are largely considered Süssmayr's own composition, though likely based on discussions or maybe fragments Mozart shared. Süssmayr claimed Mozart sang parts to him on his deathbed. Whether that's entirely accurate, we don't know.
But he finished it. And Count Walsegg got his piece.
He did. He copied it out in his own hand and had it performed in 1793, initially passing it off as his.
But Constance fought back on that, didn't she? To protect Mozart's name.
Oh, she was determined. She started selling Mozart's manuscripts to publishers, organized memorial concerts, really worked hard to establish his authorship and legacy.
And she managed to turn things around financially.
She did. Remarkably well, eventually. She saw her sons get musical educations, both became composers. Later, she remarried to a Danish diplomat, Georg Nissen, who actually helped her organize Mozart's papers and became one of his first biographers.
And the Requiem itself just grew in stature over time.
Immensely. It was played at funerals for Napoleon, Haydn, Beethoven. It became this iconic work, which only added to the mystique surrounding its creation and Mozart's death.
Have there been any modern attempts, like scientific ones, to solve the death mystery?
A few. Back in 1898, a pathologist named Eduard von Hoffmann tested some relics, hair, bone fragments, supposedly Mozart's, for arsenic.
Poisoning evidence.
That was the hope, but the results were inconclusive, and the origin of those relics was always a bit questionable anyway.
Anything more recent?
Well, in 2001, there was an interesting epidemiological study looking at Vienna hospital records from late 1791. They found evidence of a localized outbreak of strep infection, possibly leading to kidney complications.
Matching Mozart's symptoms.
Pretty closely, yeah. It suggested acute nephritic syndrome, perhaps following a strep infection, could explain the fever, rash, swelling, and kidney failure.
But DNA testing is impossible.
Essentially, yes. Because of the common grave, the quicklime, the fact that graves were reused after about 10 years, the chances of identifying his specific remains are virtually zero.
So, after all this, why does the mystery still grip us? Why do we keep coming back to it?
I think, part of it is just the tragedy itself. Genius cut down at 35, it feels wrong, somehow unfinished.
We want an explanation that feels bigger.
Exactly. We crave narrative. A random infection, however severe, feels mundane, almost insulting to his genius. But a poisoning plot, Masonic revenge, that has drama, symmetry. It feels like a story worthy of his stature, even if it's not true.
That contrast you mentioned earlier, the ordinary cause versus the extraordinary life.
Mm-hmm.
But you also suggested his music, the Requiem, pushes back against the melodrama.
I think it does. If you listen closely, beyond the powerful dies irae, there's so much compassion, even resignation. The recorder, the lacrimosa, they speak more of acceptance, maybe, than paranoia or terror about being murdered. It feels like he's grappling with mortality itself, not necessarily a specific assassin.
And the questions just keep coming. Biographers pore over letters looking for hints.
Medical historians test new theories based on evolving knowledge.
Musicians still debate how much of the Requiem is Mozart and how much is Süssmayr.
Precisely. And in a way, that lack of a final, definitive answer keeps him alive for us. It keeps the conversation going. He remains this figure of endless fascination.
It's almost like getting a concrete answer would somehow diminish the story. The uncertainty keeps us engaged, keeps us listening to the music, perhaps, searching for clues there.
That's a great way to put it. And no matter what the ultimate cause was, the fact remains that he took that experience, that fear or pain or illness, and transformed it into this incredible work of art that still speaks to us.
A masterpiece born from darkness. Truly incredible.
It really is. And speaking of artists surrounded by darkness and mystery.
Ah, yes. Our next deep dive takes us into a different kind of intrigue. We're looking at Niccolo Paganini.
The violin virtuoso, whose playing was so unbelievable people literally thought he'd made a pact with the devil.
Exactly. We'll explore those rumors, the superstitions, and the bizarre saga surrounding even his burial. It took decades to find him a final resting place.
Ooh, that sounds fantastic. Diabolical techniques, scandals, posthumous wanderings.
It should be quite the story. But for now, thank you for joining us on this exploration of Mozart's final enigmatic chapter.
Always a pleasure.
And here's something for you to think about. Consider the power of those unfinished stories, the mysteries without neat solutions, and how they continue to shape how we see and understand the past.